Is proximity bias hurting your career? Is this topic hitting a little too close to home? A proximity pun this early on a Monday. Oh my gosh, who's doing the writing around here? Anyway, let's talk about it. Welcome to It's Monday. What's Jonathan thinking? Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new Monday and a new episode of It's Monday. What's Jonathan thinking? And this week, we are tackling a phenomenon that I hadn't really thought much about until I was perusing LinkedIn last week, and an article hit my radar screen. The byline read, "Proximity bias may hurt your career?" I'll post a link to that article below. After reading this, I thought to myself, well, proximity bias sounds pretty brutal. I'm not like that, am I? It turns out the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle, but first, let's establish a definition of proximity bias. The BBC describes proximity bias as an unconscious and unwise tendency to give preferential treatment to those in our immediate vicinity. When I heard this, it immediately conjured up a memory of my first week at Booz Allen and Hamilton, where we were coached to make sure we were visible. That visibility to your leaders and especially the partners was the key to advancing and finding new opportunities at the firm. If managers knew who you were, they would call on you when that big project came about or that important decision was being made. Such things were opportunities to prove yourself to management and were critical to your advancement through the ranks of the firm. So why is this coming up now? Well, COVID for starters. COVID has forced us all to go remote, to be away from the mothership, if you will, and people are justifiably concerned with how this forced exile from headquarters or away from even remote leadership is going to impact their ability to advance in their careers. COVID forced that physical separation upon us, and with that went access to leadership. Access to the very people who can influence careers and advancement in those careers. Once again, and disproportionately, women in the workplace have had to choose between caring for their families and going into the office. Add to that concerns about economic viability, increased inflation, continuing supply chain issues, and it's understandable that people are concerned and on edge about what the state of all things means for their upward mobility. And we would all be digging our heads in the sand if we believe that such concerns are not at least contributing to what people are calling the Great Resignation. Let's face it, friends. We don't know when we're going to see each other again. We cannot forecast when life will return to normal or if the current normal will be the new normal, and life as we knew it left the building in March 2020. I started this video series, for example, so my team could see me because many of them live in New Delhi. Goodness knows when it's going to be safe for us all to congregate again. COVID, it seems, is causing us to revisit many of the biases we hold and figure out how to create companies that can persist and stay viable despite the massive change in culture we are having to figure out as remote first or choose where you work policies become the norm and not the exception. But proximity bias is a tough one because it is simultaneously exacerbating other cognitive biases we have about people. Biases that cause us to form an opinion about who's performing well and who is not. Is the loudest person on the call performing better, or are they simply sucking up all the oxygen? These are the things that are going to challenge us as leaders, and we must address them. Our remote work is not going away, and as companies grow, they typically scale regionally or globally anyway, further adding a geographic divide that prevents our best workers from being visible to leadership. I think we have to be careful here and make sure that we are not letting our predilection to focus on whoever is in the room over those who are not. I'll give you an example. I read an article on this topic by Ali Kovalik at Globalization Partners, and she offered this anecdotal illustration. She talks about a time when she happened to be in the office, and she says, "My colleague was on the call with someone when the topic of conversation turned to a casual brainstorm. That brainstorm was going to impact a project I was involved in. And because I was in the room, I was able to proactively offer input. In this instance, I benefited from proximity bias. The initial exclusion was not rooted in bad intentions, but that pesky habit we all have of trying to do the best we can with the available resources. So what's the remedy here? Well, I think it's manifold, but let me offer some thoughts. Number one, I think, is awareness. Check your own biases and be honest with yourself and the kind of leader you are. Maybe you are consciously or unconsciously favoring those you see the most. If you are going through the list of people in your organization and find people you couldn't even pick out of a lineup, well, it takes two to tango. Yes, they should be making an effort to get to know you, but the reverse holds true as well. Get to know your team. Spend time with them. A few weeks ago, I created an optional calendar event for my team that I called Office Hours. I sent it out because I honestly don't know when we'll see each other, but I still have relationships to build. So I put out an hour each week set aside for walk-up conversations. This is just one idea. There are other ways to reach out. And number two, review how you collaborate. It might add a bit of an overhead to your work and decision processes, but I've seen articles that encourage things like emphasizing knowledge tools, things like Teams, OneNotes, wikis, digital places where distributed teams can go to read through the notes, decisions, and action items that come out of meetings they're unable to attend. And take measures to minimize the risk of communication bias. This is the third strategy. Our minds are geared towards favoring those in front of us over those on the phone. Ask yourself, what can I do to make sure everyone on the call feels like they are included and has a voice? This includes things like being aware that we are all unable to see visual cues of discomfort or angst when all we see of people is their head and shoulders. Take inflection points in your meetings to make sure that people are heard. And take the time to ask those you know are quiet to weigh in. And finally, review the last 5 promotions in your organization and ask yourself why. Why were those people promoted over others? Hopefully your promotions are sufficiently democratized and everyone has a fair chance at making it to the next step in their careers. But if everyone on that list is from the same city with visibility to the same leadership, well, then you might have something new to work on in 2022. One thing we consciously do at Cyber Group is put a member of the executive leadership team in charge of writing the reviews of our principals. But they have to write the review for someone they've never worked with. The goal here is explicitly to ensure that bias is not the cause of a good or bad review. I think this is a practice we can push even further down into the organization as we continue to grow and scale. Remote work, distributed teams, it's not easy, but there are steps we can take to make sure that our new world is just as inviting as the old. As we have found at Cyber Group, making it a central core of our recruitment strategy to seek talent wherever it is has created opportunities for our culture to become more diversified and for our clients to benefit from thinkers who would otherwise never make it to our radar screen if we only focus on Dallas or New Delhi. Our business worlds are global. Our teams should reflect the world. These are my thoughts. As always, I welcome yours. Feel free to comment below. And thank you to Ali Kovalek for your inspiring article on this topic. I'll post a link to it below. And I'll continue to research and speak on this very important topic of the cognitive biases that sometimes prevent us from being the best leaders we can and should be. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to It's Monday, What's Jonathan Thinking? Bye for now, friends.